In a world that often feels cold and indifferent, it's easy to wonder if small acts of kindness really matter. But sometimes, a simple gesture of compassion can set off a chain of events that changes lives in ways we never imagined. Join us as we dive into the heartwarming story of Rebecca, a gas station attendant who chose to help an elderly man in need, only to face unexpected consequences. What happens next is a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, kindness has a way of finding its way back to us. This story will leave you inspired, reminding us all that doing good, even when it's difficult, is always worth it. Rebecca's days were marked by a relentless routine. The gas station she worked at was always buzzing with hurried customers, impatient drivers, and the occasional regular who would chat with her for a few moments before rushing back into the flow of their busy lives. Though it was a modest job, Rebecca took pride in it. She greeted every customer with a smile, even when her own struggles weighed heavily on her heart. She had dreams, big ones. Dreams of studying, of building a better life. But for now, those dreams had to be shelved. Bills didn't care about dreams, and rent had to be paid. The job didn't pay much, and her savings were minimal, but Rebecca held on to her belief that small acts of kindness could still make a difference in the world. That belief would soon be put to the test in a way she never imagined. One morning, as she was beginning her shift, she noticed an elderly man driving up slowly in a beat-up car that looked like it had seen better days decades ago. He parked, struggled out of the vehicle, and made his way to the counter. His clothes were worn, his hands trembling slightly, and his eyes carried the weight of many hard years. He handed Rebecca a few crumpled bills and, with a shaky voice, asked for just enough gas to make it home. Rebecca glanced at the money in her hand. It wasn't nearly enough for even a quarter tank, and she could see the embarrassment and worry in the man's eyes. She knew all too well what it felt like to be in a tough spot. Without a moment's hesitation, she decided to pay for his gas herself, filling up his tank fully. When the elderly man realized what she had done, his eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." Rebecca shook her head with a warm smile. "You don't have to. Just promise me that if you're ever in a position to help someone else, you'll pay it forward." The old man, who introduced himself as Mr. Thompson, nodded slowly, visibly touched. He told her a bit about himself, how he had lost his wife recently and was struggling not just financially, but emotionally too. He felt alone, adrift in a world that seemed to have forgotten him. Rebecca's kindness was a rare glimmer of hope in what had been a dark time for him. He left with a heart full of gratitude, waving to Rebecca as he drove off. Little did Rebecca know, her act of kindness had been observed by her manager, Mr. Daniels. He had been lurking in his office, reviewing security footage and scrutinizing every detail of his employees' work. He was a man driven by numbers and profits, with little patience for anything that didn't align with his narrow view of business. When he saw that Rebecca had paid for a customer's gas out of her own pocket, his face twisted with anger. To him, this was not an act of generosity. It was a violation of store policy, a disruption of the carefully calculated margins he so zealously guarded. Later that afternoon, as Rebecca was finishing her shift, Mr. Daniels stormed up to her. "What were you thinking?" he snapped, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're here to do a job, not run a charity." Rebecca was caught off guard. She tried to explain her actions, to convey the compassion she felt for the elderly man, but Mr. Daniels wasn't interested in hearing it. He cut her off with a wave of his hand. "You're fired," he said coldly. "Pack your things and leave. I won't have employees who can't follow simple rules." Rebecca's heart sank. She had known Mr. Daniels was strict, but she never imagined he would fire her for showing kindness. With trembling hands, she gathered her belongings and left the gas station that had been her livelihood for the past year. The bitter sting of injustice weighed heavily on her, and as she walked home, tears filled her eyes. How would she make it through the next few weeks without a paycheck? She had no family nearby to rely on and very little in savings. That evening, Rebecca sat in her small one-bedroom apartment, staring blankly at the walls. Her mind was a whirlwind of worry, fear, and self-doubt. She replayed the events in her head, wondering if she had made a mistake. Should she have just stuck to the rules? Should she have kept her head down, focused on herself, and avoided getting involved? As the night wore on, she was startled by a knock at her door. It was unusual for anyone to visit her, especially this late. Curious, she got up and opened the door. What she saw left her speechless. Standing there was Mr. Thompson, the elderly man she had helped earlier, and beside him was a man in his 40s, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. The man introduced himself as Robert Thompson, Mr. Thompson's son. His expression was serious, but there was a warmth in his eyes as he looked at Rebecca. "My father told me about what you did today," Robert began. "You went out of your way to help him, and that's something I deeply appreciate. People like you are rare, and I believe that kind of selflessness deserves to be rewarded, not punished." Rebecca listened in stunned silence as Robert explained that he and his father owned a chain of convenience stores and were looking for someone with integrity and heart to manage one of their newest locations. Mr. Thompson had insisted that Rebecca was exactly the kind of person they needed. "You have the job if you want it," Robert said, handing her a business card with his contact information. "It comes with better pay, benefits, and an opportunity to grow. All you have to do is say yes." Tears welled up in Rebecca's eyes. She couldn't believe that just hours ago she had lost her job and her sense of direction, and now here she was, being offered a new beginning. "I don't know what to say," she stammered, overwhelmed with emotion. "Just say yes," Mr. Thompson said with a kind smile. "Good people deserve good things, and you're one of the best." Rebecca took a deep breath and smiled through her tears. "Yes," she said, her voice shaky but full of gratitude. "Thank you, I would be honored." The following day, Rebecca found herself in a completely different environment, a bright, welcoming office where she was greeted by employees who valued kindness and teamwork. Her life had taken a complete turn, and as she settled into her new role, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Word spread quickly about Rebecca's story. Her former manager, Mr. Daniels, soon faced the consequences of his actions when the gas station's owner caught wind of what had happened. A man of integrity himself, the owner was appalled that Mr. Daniels had fired someone for an act of kindness. Within a week, Mr. Daniels found himself out of a job, and the gas station was under new management that believed in treating both employees and customers with respect and empathy. As for Rebecca, her life only got better from there. She excelled in her new role, earning the trust and admiration of everyone she worked with. Her salary allowed her to start saving for the future again, and she even began taking night classes to pursue her long-held dream of furthering her education. But what mattered most to her wasn't the money or the job title. It was the reaffirmation of something she had always believed, that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult or comes at a personal cost, is always worth it. Kindness has a way of coming back when you least expect it, often in ways more beautiful than you could ever imagine. Years later, Rebecca would look back on that fateful day at the gas station as the moment that changed everything. Not because of the job she lost, but because of the opportunity she gained. And whenever she was asked about the turning point in her life, she would simply smile and say, "It all started with a tank of gas and a little bit of faith in doing what's right." And so, Rebecca's journey continued, marked by compassion, resilience, and the belief that even in a world that can be cold and unkind, there is still room for warmth and generosity. She became an inspiration to others, proving that no matter how dark the world might seem, one small act of kindness can light a path to something greater. Rebecca's new job brought not just stability, but a renewed sense of purpose. Managing the convenience store came naturally to her. She treated the employees like family and focused on building an environment where everyone felt valued. Under her leadership, sales began to rise, and customer satisfaction soared. But it wasn't just about the numbers, it was the little things that mattered to Rebecca. She would often spend time listening to her employees' personal stories, offering advice and support whenever she could. It wasn't long before the staff began to feel like a tight-knit community. People who worked under her knew that she genuinely cared. Her kindness had a ripple effect, transforming the atmosphere of the store. Customers began to notice, too. They would leave with more than just their purchases. They'd leave with a smile, uplifted by the warmth and positivity Rebecca exuded. As Rebecca settled into her new life, she made it a point to check in on Mr. Thompson regularly. The bond they had formed was more than just a fleeting connection. Rebecca soon discovered that Mr. Thompson had a wealth of stories to tell, tales of his younger days, of love and loss, and of the hard-earned wisdom that only time could bring. These conversations became a source of comfort for both of them. Mr. Thompson saw Rebecca as the daughter he never had, and Rebecca saw him as the family she had longed for. One day, while sitting together in Mr. Thompson's cozy living room, he shared a piece of news that left Rebecca speechless. "I've been thinking a lot about my future," he said, his voice laced with emotion. "I don't have much time left, Rebecca, and I want to make sure that what I leave behind goes to someone who will truly appreciate it." Rebecca's brow furrowed with concern. "What do you mean, Mr. Thompson?" she asked gently. Mr. Thompson looked at her with a soft smile. "I've decided to name you as the primary beneficiary of my estate. I've lived a long life, and I don't need much in these final years. I want you to have my home and whatever savings I have left." Tears filled Rebecca's eyes. "Mr. Thompson, I can't accept that. You've already given me so much. Your friendship is more than I could ever ask for." But Mr. Thompson shook his head. "You gave me something priceless, Rebecca. You reminded me that there are still good people in this world, and that kindness isn't dead. I've spent my life holding on to things that no longer matter, and now I want to leave them in the hands of someone who will use them to make the world a better place." Overwhelmed with gratitude, Rebecca could only nod, promising to honor his wishes. She knew that this unexpected gift was more than just a material inheritance. It was a symbol of the impact that one small act of kindness could have. Months went by, and Mr. Thompson's health began to decline. Rebecca spent more and more time by his side, making sure he was comfortable and surrounded by care. During one particularly difficult evening, as Mr. Thompson lay in bed, his breathing shallow, he reached out and took Rebecca's hand. "Thank you for everything," he whispered. "You've given me more than you'll ever know." Rebecca leaned in, tears streaming down her face. "No, Mr. Thompson, you've given me more. You changed my life, and I'll never forget that." With a peaceful smile, Mr. Thompson closed his eyes and drifted away, leaving Rebecca heartbroken but grateful for the precious time they had shared. His passing was a profound moment in her life, one that made her reflect deeply on what truly mattered. In the weeks that followed, Rebecca honored Mr. Thompson's memory by using the inheritance to support causes that were close to her heart. She donated to charities that helped the elderly and established a scholarship fund in his name for young students who wanted to pursue education but lacked the financial means. She knew that this was exactly what he would have wanted. But Rebecca's journey didn't end there. Her own story continued to evolve in ways she hadn't expected. With the stability and confidence that came from her newfound success, she decided to chase one of her long-forgotten dreams, opening her own art studio. Art had always been a passion of hers, a creative outlet that allowed her to express her emotions and dreams. With the support of Robert and his business connections, Rebecca found a small but charming space where she could bring her vision to life. The studio quickly became a hub for the community. Local artists, both young and old, would gather there to learn, create, and share their work. Rebecca's art classes became incredibly popular, not just because of her talent, but because of the warmth she radiated. She encouraged everyone to embrace their creativity, to see the beauty in the world even when life got tough. One day, as she was setting up for a new class, a familiar face walked through the door. It was Robert Thompson. He had been keeping an eye on Rebecca's progress, impressed by how she had turned the opportunities she'd been given into something truly special. "Rebecca," Robert said with a smile, "you've done more than just honor my father's memory. You've created something beautiful out of kindness, just as he hoped you would." Rebecca smiled back, her heart full. "Your father taught me that it's not about how much you have, but what you do with what you have. I want to keep spreading that message." As they stood there, surrounded by the vibrant colors of artwork and the joyful energy of creativity, Rebecca realized that her journey had come full circle. What started as a simple act of kindness at a gas station had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. She had found not just a career, but a calling, one that allowed her to blend her passion with her purpose. Over time, Rebecca's story became a source of inspiration for many. She was invited to speak at local events, sharing her message of hope, resilience, and the power of compassion. People were moved by her journey, seeing in her story a reminder that even in a world that often feels harsh and indifferent, there are still moments of grace and redemption. Rebecca's life was far from perfect. There were still challenges and setbacks along the way. But she never lost sight of the values that had guided her through it all: kindness, integrity, and the belief that doing good, no matter how small the act, always matters. And so, as Rebecca continued to live out her story, she carried with her the lessons learned from Mr. Thompson, the strength she had found in herself, and the unwavering belief that true wealth isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by the lives you touch along the way. Rebecca's art studio blossomed into more than just a creative space. It became a community cornerstone, a place where people from all walks of life came together. She introduced free workshops for underprivileged kids, knowing how much creativity could inspire hope in those who felt like the world had forgotten them. The studio's walls were soon filled with vibrant paintings, drawings, and crafts made by people who were encouraged to express themselves, regardless of their skill level. Rebecca's guiding philosophy was simple: everyone has a story, and every story deserves a voice. One evening, after closing the studio, Rebecca was tidying up when she noticed a small envelope on her desk. There was no name on it, just a simple "thank you" written in elegant handwriting. Curious, she opened it and found a heartfelt letter. The letter was from a young woman named Emily, one of the students who had regularly attended the free classes. Emily shared how she had been struggling with depression and self-doubt for years. She had been on the verge of giving up when she stumbled upon Rebecca's studio. The welcoming environment and the freedom to create without judgment had given her a new sense of purpose. The letter ended with a touching line: "You saved me in ways you'll never know. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible." Rebecca's heart swelled as she read the words. She realized that the studio had become more than just a place for art. It was a haven, a beacon of hope for those who needed it most. It was then that Rebecca decided to expand her efforts. With the help of Robert Thompson and a few generous donors, she launched a foundation dedicated to providing free art programs and mental health support to those in need. The foundation quickly gained attention, drawing in artists, therapists, and volunteers who were passionate about the cause. Rebecca's vision had grown far beyond what she could have imagined in those difficult days when she was struggling just to get by. The Foundation's programs reached schools, community centers, and shelters, touching lives in ways Rebecca had always dreamed of but never thought possible. As the years passed, Rebecca continued to be a guiding light in her community. Her story spread, attracting media attention and inspiring others to start similar initiatives in their own cities. But despite all the recognition and success, Rebecca remained humble. She never forgot where she came from, or how one small act of kindness had changed everything for her. One day, while visiting a new location for her foundation, Rebecca encountered someone she never expected to see again: Mr. Daniels, her former manager. He looked very different from the rigid, unfeeling man she remembered. His expression was softer, his eyes less cold. He approached her hesitantly, almost as if he was unsure whether she'd even acknowledge him. "Rebecca," he began, his voice filled with a mix of regret and humility, "I've heard about everything you've done, how you turned that one moment into something so powerful. I was wrong, so wrong back then. I couldn't see the bigger picture, and I lost sight of what really matters. I'm truly sorry for the way I treated you." Rebecca was taken aback. For a moment, memories of that painful day flashed in her mind: the anger, the humiliation, the uncertainty. But as she looked at the man standing before her, she realized he, too, was on his own journey of growth. And just as she had always believed in giving people second chances, she saw this as an opportunity to practice what she preached. "Thank you for saying that," Rebecca replied, her tone sincere. "We all make mistakes. What's important is what we learn from them and how we move forward. I hope you found your own way to make a difference." Mr. Daniels nodded, visibly relieved by her forgiveness. "I have," he said softly. "I've been working with a local charity, helping people who've fallen on hard times get back on their feet. I guess I finally realized that it's never too late to change." As they parted ways, Rebecca felt a deep sense of closure. Life had a way of coming full circle, and in that moment she knew that everything she had gone through, every challenge, every heartache, had led her exactly where she was meant to be. The studio, the foundation, and the countless lives she had touched were all part of a legacy rooted in one simple truth: that kindness, even when it's met with resistance, is never in vain. It has the power to transform not just the lives of those who receive it, but also those who give it. Years later, Rebecca would often sit by the window of her studio, watching the sunset as it painted the sky in brilliant hues. She would reflect on how far she had come, from the gas station attendant struggling to make ends meet, to a community leader whose life's work was dedicated to helping others. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, but with the lessons she had learned and the support of the people who believed in her, she was ready for whatever the future held. And so, Rebecca's story continued, a story of resilience, grace, and the enduring power of a heart that chooses to be kind, even in a world that doesn't always seem to appreciate it. For Rebecca, that was what true wealth was all about: not the material things, but the lives she had touched and the love that had come back to her tenfold. As she prepared to close the studio for the night, she smiled, knowing that the journey was far from over. New chapters awaited, and she was ready to write them, one act of kindness at a time. Rebecca's life had become a tapestry of moments woven together by compassion, forgiveness, and the unshakable belief that even the smallest kindness could create ripples far beyond what she could see. As the years passed, her foundation grew, reaching communities far beyond her own. But despite the growth, Rebecca remained the same humble woman who had once paid for an elderly man's gasoline, believing in doing good, not for recognition, but because it was simply the right thing to do. One crisp autumn afternoon, Rebecca hosted an event at her original studio, now a vibrant community center that had expanded to include workshops, counseling spaces, and art galleries featuring the works of people from all walks of life. The event celebrated the 10-year anniversary of the foundation's opening, and as she looked around the room filled with supporters, volunteers, and those whose lives had been touched by her work, Rebecca felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. As the evening wore on, a hush fell over the room when a surprise guest was announced. An elderly man slowly made his way to the front, supported by a cane but standing tall with dignity. It was Robert Thompson, now in his twilight years. Though time had aged him, the warmth in his eyes was unmistakable. With a steady voice, he spoke to the crowd. I stand here today because of a single act of kindness. My father was given hope when he had none, and that spark of compassion set off a chain reaction that brought us all to this moment. Rebecca, you showed us that real success isn't measured by wealth or status, but by the lives we lift up along the way. You turned what could have been just another day into something extraordinary, and in doing so, you've created a legacy that will outlast us all. As applause filled the room, Rebecca felt tears well up in her eyes. She never sought out recognition, but hearing those words meant more to her than any accolade or award ever could. It was a reminder that her journey, with all its ups and downs, had truly made a difference. After the event, Rebecca stepped outside to find a moment of quiet. The stars twinkled above as a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and she felt at peace. Her life had been a winding road of unexpected turns, challenges, and triumphs, but through it all, she had remained true to herself and the values she held dear. As she stood there, lost in thought, she felt a small tug on her sleeve. She looked down to see a little girl, clutching a handmade drawing. "Miss Rebecca," the girl said shyly, "I made this for you." Rebecca knelt down to take the picture. It was a simple, colorful drawing of a flower blooming in a garden. Written in the child's careful handwriting were the words, "Thank you for helping flowers like me grow." Rebecca's heart swelled as she looked at the little girl, recognizing in her the same spark of hope that had guided her through her own struggles. She realized then that this, nurturing growth in others, being a light in someone's darkness, was the true purpose she had been searching for all along. The future held many more adventures, but as Rebecca stood there with the drawing in hand, surrounded by the love and gratitude of so many, she knew that no matter where life took her next, she had already found everything she needed. Her life's work was not about building something for herself, but about planting seeds of kindness in others. And just like those seeds, her legacy would continue to grow, long after she was gone, spreading love, compassion, and the belief that even the smallest act of goodness can bloom into something extraordinary. With a contented smile, Rebecca turned back to the warm glow of the community center, ready to embrace whatever new chapter awaited her, confident in the knowledge that a heart led by kindness will always find its way home. If this story touched your heart, remember that acts of kindness, no matter how small, can make a difference in someone's life. Just like Rebecca, you have the power to bring hope, compassion, and change into the world. Take a moment today to reach out to someone who might need a helping hand or a kind word. Your simple act of goodness could be the spark that changes everything for them. If you believe in the power of kindness, like this video, share it with others, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us all that we can be a light in someone's darkness. You have the power to create ripples of change. Be someone's reason to smile today.